Mela, merħba għal di l-ewwel attività l-ewwel attività Merlin ta' dan il-Festival tal-Ktieb. Żgur differenti minn tas-soltu f'dal-format ngħidu hekk. U ħanibdew b'attività interessanti għax fil-waqt li qed jiġri bħalissa jillimitana f'diversi affarijiet, qed jagħtina wkoll opportunitajiet nesploraw affarijiet li kieku dal-vivo kif ngħidu hekk ma stajniex nagħmlu. U għall-ktieb tal-lejla, ktieb ġdid, romanz ġdid li għadna kemm ippubblikajna, kellna l-opportunità li apparti li għandna magħna li traduttur li traduċi Malti, għandna wkoll wieħed miż-żewġ awturi Taljani tar-romanz. Ir-romanz huwa L-aħħar sajf ta' Berlin, fl-oriġinal mit-Taljan L-ultima estate di Berlino, miktub minn Federico Buffa u Paolo Frusca. U traduzzjoni għal Malti saret minn Mark Vella. U il-lejla għandna magħna lil Mark ovvjament u lil Paolo Frusca. I will now switch to English, obviously, for obvious reasons. Just briefly, I'm welcoming Mark, obviously, Mark Vella, the translator of the book, and Paolo Frusca. We're very honored to have you with us tonight. And basically, we're very interested to hear, we have this unique opportunity to hear both points of view. Just to get the ball rolling, I kind of came across this book for the first time in Bologna at Fiera del Libro a few years back. And I read the original, the publisher, the Italian publisher gave me a copy of the original. And I fell in love with it immediately. I said, we have to publish this book. And we spoke to the publisher, agreed on it, and then Mark came into the picture. And if I may start, maybe Mark, you've obviously translated many things in the past. You've written your own literature as well. What attracted you? What made you feel this book was different, was intriguing, was worth your time? Because obviously translating it was not a mean feat.
First of all, I'm happy to meet Paolo for the first time. So that's a very curious aspect of translation.
For me, yes.
When you are translating a foreign author, but you probably have not met him. So I got to know Paolo's face even recently, and we're friends on Facebook and all that. So this is like the first time we're really meeting, and we had to say pleased to meet you as soon as the video was up. Secondly, I remember, Chris, that right after the Bologna Book Fair, you had told me, listen, I've got this book, I loved it, I read it all in un fiato, and I'm not too much into sports, as you know, Mark, you told me, but I loved it, although it's about sports and so on. And I obviously was excited about the opportunity to translate a novel. I mean, something I've done, but as you know, I am a translator of very different texts also to the novel. And the fact that I was working from Italian, which is a language which is very close to my heart for different reasons. And I read it too, and I had the same feeling. It is also about a period which I'm very interested in, especially the 30s. It's also my field within Maltese literature and my studies, so the first third of the last century before the war and so on. And there was sports. I am a sports person in the sense I'm a passive sports person. I have consumed more sport than practiced it, this connected to translation. It's not a boast. When I was living in Luxembourg, I also got 2 licenses for coaching football, coaching kids, and I did it in my 4th language, which was very difficult, in French, from the Belgian Federation. So there was a lot of translation going on in my mind. And anyway, all this contributed to having this great experience. And I read the book, and then as you go along and you translate bit by bit, you start discovering different aspects. Even the challenges of translation start getting you deeper into the text and even into the author's intention. I was imagining Paolo and Federico, conceiving the plot, researching the historical aspects of it. So it was a great experience, I must say, and a pleasure to translate such a book, which is literature, which has a popular and a divulgative feel. You know, it makes history so much more accessible, you know, to the average reader.
Yes, yes. No, I am also really interested to hear translation like this. It's for me really, I'm really proud about it. Maybe some interesting for you both, because the very beginning of this novel is in a theater play. So at the very beginning, Federico Buffa, he wanted to play the main characters of Wolfgang Fuster on stage. And he asked me to write down with him a theater play. And we do that as a theater play, quite successful. I will say we had at the end of the day more than 150 performances in Italy, all around in Italy. And during one of these performances, Rizzoli, publisher, they told us, okay, the staff here could be very, very interesting for a novel. And so we put a lot of stuff of theater in the novel, and maybe you can also see that some aspects of the novel are easily to think like a play in a theater on stage. For example, all the monologue of Wolfgang Furstner, they are typical kind of what we have had on the stage. And
so even the fictitious parts with the journalists, etc., those were originally on the they came from stage as well, from the stage.
No, that's perfect what you're saying now. That means you're really the perfect dimension of this. On stage, the main role, the main character must be Wolfgang Furstner. Wolfgang Furstner and the Olympic Games, because, for example, on the stage, there was a huge screen, and on this huge screen was going the film Olympia of Leni Riefenstahl. But to build a novel, we have the sensation we need not only the main character, but also an antagonist to give a kind of counterbalance for the both character. And that's clear. Wolfgang Furstner is a real tragic figure in the history. The American journalist is a fiction figure. But I guess both are working fine together. So it was a good idea to put a second important character in the novel. And also another thing, I like very much what Mark told a couple of minutes ago. Sport and the 20th century. Sport and 20th century are impossible to be divided from me. Sport, as we know, begins with Olympia Games in Athens. And through the whole century, there are so many facts and events that are in connection with history. For example, this huge propaganda machine that was for the Nazi government, the Berlin Olympic Games. At the very beginning, the Germans, they didn't want to have the Olympic Games, but they see the World Football Championship in Italy 2 years earlier, and they see how fine it worked out for Mussolini as a propaganda, and they say, okay, it worked, it's fine. So sport and politics, always a huge connection. Maybe really on the top of that, these Olympic Games in Berlin.
As regards the theatrical aspect, it set me thinking because, yes, obviously, Forstner speaks very differently, you know, in a narrative sense to the journalist, and there are a lot of monologues, as you said, you know, and even the tones of the monologues, those many short sentences, you know, and then a long thought, which is complex. Those were also on a linguistic level, they were something relatively new to what we might find in Maltese literature or in literary scripts in Maltese. And in fact, that was, because we should even mention someone else who was part of the book, when we came to the editing stage and the editor was reading the Maltese rendering, a lot of work, most of the editing work was done on Forstner's voice, you know, on giving the accent, which is quite grave most of the times, of his thoughts, which are thoughts which obviously become more complex, more worrying, darker, as we know, as the
history go ahead, yes.
And even in the beginning, however, because Forstner's troubles in a way start very early, they are foreboding in the sense you already get a prediction of what is going to happen. So the novel starts in a dark way, and there's this dark sustained.
Yes.
And even rhythmically and linguistically, there was this challenge. And I think when we looked at the book different times, as it happens, it was always Forstner who was challenging us. You know, the journalist, Eleanor Holm, they were very nice to translate. You know, you were free with colloquialisms. It was fun. But Forstner, you had to choose the right word, and even rhythmically. So I guess that's the theatrical aspect which you are referring to.
In fact,
sorry, please.
Sorry, no, please go ahead.
No, it was for me a very difficult part to write down Forstner, because when I read a couple of biography of Forstner and a couple of other books where I could read his history, it was for me the same greatness like ancient Greek heroes. His life and above all the last month, they were for me the same like an ancient Greek tragedy. This unbelievable. I don't want now to make too much spoiler. I think the reader has the right to read the novel without knowing how it's going on. But yes, but this sensation that he will be destroyed, his life will be destroyed from a machinery he built.
Yes.
That must be really unbelievable. When I read it, it was for me very difficult to try to imagine it and to put down in a novel. He was really a German strong nationalist. He fought in the First World War with a lot of medals. He fought on this Freikorps against Poland. He was really a strong nationalist, and at the same time, he was on the top on this when he tried to organize and manage all around the Olympic Village, and suddenly the same machinery he helped a lot to build, he experienced that they want to destroy his life. It's really a really unbelievable character for me.
In fact, I don't want to make this too political, but obviously I was reading it various times as Mark was working on it, the editing, etc. These past 4 years, and it was difficult not to see the parallelisms with all the, as you said, with the propaganda machine, the power to create people and then to destroy them, and as you say, his own machinery, how people fall in and out of grace, and it was quite a powerful read to read, even in parallel with the usual history repeats itself, etc. thing. And One other thing I also was going to mention earlier, as Mark mentioned, it's I think quite unusual for us. I mean, Maltese literature, the corpus of not translated actual Maltese literature. Correct me, Mark, if I'm wrong. I don't think we have that many novels that center around sports, and definitely
Yes.
none that I can think of that merge, as Paolo was saying, sport
Exactly. No.
politics and high almost Greek drama in a way.
Yes. No, that is, I mean, I think that was even appreciated by readers, as we've seen from comments, and there was a review on Goodreads, etc. I think, and this is a publishing argument, which I think you would understand immediately, even having been a publisher myself in my Nel Mio Piccolo, that publishing of these newish texts, which are new for the Maltese language, are even inspiration for writing differently in Maltese, for going beyond the canon, the usual recipes or stratagems. So I think it even widens the horizons, the literary horizon, or the horizons of expectation even, both of the readers and of the writers.
Yes.
So I think this book will be enjoyed by prospective readers, and has been already enjoyed, because there's all these elements, in a certain balance, without being too highbrow, without being too complex. There's the grave and the light, the dark and the light, the serious and the humoristic, and then there's history. I mean, this is even a tendency in modern literature, as we know. That there are many of these this historical fiction, for want of a better word. We tried it even with Giovanni Bonello anthology. So you write fiction about something real, and that's a lovely game, I think, for the author. I believe Paolo enjoyed a lot, I'm sure, writing about Jesse Owens and about Riefenstahl and her cameras in the holes.
In the holes, yes.
I bet that was great fun, and it was great fun for me to research it, to go into YouTube, just key in, and see a film of Jesse Owens, trying to find a football match between Austria and Peru, and going on Wikipedia. I'm a great promoter of Wikipedia recently, and getting to know exactly how Lutz Long looked like and all that, and you see the characters. You see the characters in front of you, and you can imagine them. And that even helps, not exactly to translate, because I mean, you translate what's on the text, but to get to the novel, to love it, to embrace it more. So yes, that was great fun, and that was it made me, own the novel more. So it wasn't just a translation job, but you're owning this novel. I would like to mention, Chris, we talked about it during the, before the publishing, and maybe Paolo does not know it, that there is a very remote, small, but I like mentioning it, Maltese connection. Indeed. But very remote. Because, I mean, obviously, it's the interest in sport, and I was even trying to, I was trying to find compromises, as every translator does. How would maybe a Maltese have seen the Olympics at the time? He would obviously have read on the papers. How would a journalist have reported the Olympics of the time? And I took a look at a few newspapers too, and I was trying to use a language that might have been used in the 30s, but with Maltese, I managed to find a compromise, I guess, with using terms which are familiar, terms which are not always in English, anyway, that's the usual debate we have. But the Maltese connection is that in the Olympics of 1936, we had sent a contingent. If I'm not mistaken, there was a water polo team, but there were 2 runners. Okay. And our 2 runners participated in the heats, so in the very first races. One of them ran against Jesse Owens, and the other one ran against Lutz Long, I guess, or anyway. So we participated in them, and they were Bencini and Cassar Torreggiani. We came last, which is something, obviously, I mean, I'm not saying it in a derogatory manner, but, you know, a small country with limited resources in sports, we all know what happens. But I was happy, you know,
fascinating,
where even a co-national, you know, touched in a way with Jesse Owens.
Yes.
So, and I like talking about this Maltese connection, you know, that, I mean, we were there and we were a minimal part of this history, but it shows even how one is part of the world, you know. I mean, history touches everyone, even.
Yes, but there is
at the time.
A lot. These Olympic Games might be really something unbelievable. Some coincidences. One evening in Milan, these performances. After the play, one old man came in the stage and to greeting Federico Buffa, and it was the son of Ondina Valla. It was so it's so much contacts and so much stories. Really interesting. Yes,
Incredible.
But I appreciate too much, and you say. You go and watch the picture of Lutz Long or so to have the same. I have heard from an Italian journalist that he say I read the book the first time, and the second I read it again, and when you write a song, the title of a song, he went in YouTube and tried to hear it.
Exactly the same thing. So obviously Midnight and the Stars and You know, which is also in The Shining.
Yes. Yes.
But they are different. And even the band marches, you know, the Preußens Gloria for the Germans. A favorite, I mean, we're talking about what our favorite parts are of the book. A favorite part I have, obviously we are, even Chris, I mean, we are very familiar with Italian culture. And I liked the irony which you used as an Italian is when you describe the arrival of the Italian contingent. You know, so you have these balilla sort of, you know, all with the fez, and the German describes them as this you know, funny bunch, making jokes.
May I can say you my confession here. I went on YouTube for kind of other situation, and I simply write Italian coming in Berlin 36, and they show a train, and they went down from the train, and they are exactly dressed as I described them.
Yeah,
and they are the jazz with them hands exactly what I say. Okay,
exactly. So
that will be a chapter from Italian.
There were the Italians, you know, and the Germans who are serious, and even the how Forstner listens to
Von Gilsa.
Von Gilsa, yes, listens to not Faccetta Nera, there was the Italian anthem.
Yes,
and then
this time was Giovinezza.
You know, Giovinezza, and he's even comparing musically, you know, the gravity of the German
anthem. Austrian actually, but say German.
And the jumpy joy sort of Giovinezza, you know, and it's two different cultures who then obviously get in together, you know, for as allies.
It's obviously it's true. I researched what I read on the biography that Forstner he fought in Italy in Caporetto in this huge defeat of Italian army, and he had really the sensation of dissolving units and dissolving army. So, and it's true what he described. He was really there. It's really the history of Forstner is also of this in Caporetto. He was there.
Yeah.
As a German soldier. Yes.
Paolo, a while ago you mentioned a comment by an Italian journalist about the book. I was going to ask, in fact, what feedback there was by readers in Italy, or the reaction to the book.
Look, I don't want now to be too much, so I don't know the right word on English, but it was a really good success, this book. We won the first prize for CONI Premio per la Narrativa.
Okay.
CONI is the Italian Olympic Committee.
Yes.
And they make every year literature prize for sport novel, and we won the first place. And we have had also good placement on Bancarella Sport. It's also a huge prize in Italy. Yes. And in this case, Federico Buffen, I appreciate it very much. He won the prize of Best Journalist of the Year in Italy, and I hope that this book helped also him to win that. But he have his greatness without this book.
Yes, but this book is high praise indeed. I mean, I knew obviously about it, but it's interesting to hear directly from someone.
Yes, that's
Mark, I don't know if you'd like to read us a short extract, because obviously Paolo and you and I know the book, but people following us here might not yet have read it, or maybe are thinking about it. So maybe a short extract from the
there's an extract which both Paolo and I like, and it is Forstner. The Olympic Games are about to start. The athletes have arrived in the Olympic Village, which Forstner had basically organized and set up. Forstner is already in a situation, where he feels in danger, and he's undergoing, a lot of tribulation, mental tribulation. And anyway, he wakes up one fine day very early, and he sees a strange figure outside in the lawn, And I mean, can I say what this figure was, or shall I read it in Maltese? And then, I won't be able to read it all because it can be quite long. But anyway, it was.
Yes.
No, I think I can say it because it's interesting historically.
Yes.
He encounters a Korean athlete. So a Korean athlete, that was his nationality, who, however, at the time was forced to run representing Japan. And this was Son Kitei, who then we saw in the, in the Olympics in South Korea.
88.
He was holding the torch.
88.
And maybe what we can say is what's interesting, and I heard it from many readers, is that at the end of the book, there is the epilogue Destiny, which basically tells us who is fiction and who is not, and tells us what happened to the athletes mentioned, the figures mentioned, actors, personalities, etc. What happened, what their destinies were after the events finish. And I think it's a nice closing, summing up of this historical fiction. So there's a moment where you read a novel, where you're reading fiction, but it's about history, and then you are thrown back into history, into real life in a way. And I think it also helps you sum up what you've read. You learn what happens to Jesse Owens, what happens to Lutz Long, what's really happened to Forstner, So it brings you back to reality, and there's the weight of history on the reader. I don't want to make it sound complicated, but I think the strength of the book is even in what comes after the story ends, in Destiny. So basically, I will read a very short extract of the encounter of Forstner with this strange figure.
Okay.
Nitfa' ħarsti lejn il-panorama ħadra li tinfetaħ qudiemi. Sorpriża kbira nintebaħ figura żnella ħafifa. Ħalli kieku fatat imċajpar, libsa l-abjad, shorts u flott, rasa mikxufa. M'hemm ħadd ieħor barra kif inhu ovvju għal dal-ħin. Impeċpeċ għajnejja biex nara aħjar. Il-logħba tad-dellijiet mal-ħġieġ tat-tieqa għal-mument ġiet li naħseb li dik il-persuna kienet f'nofs ladira mingħajr ma titħarrek bil-wieqfa f'wiċċ l-ilma. Minflok wieqfa f'nofs il-ħaxix. F'pożizzjoni assurda li qatt ma rajt qabel ħlif f'xi ritratt rari tal-arti marzjali orjentali. Issa li għandna l-aħjar x'aktar xwed mill-atleti Ġappuniżi li waslu l-villaġġ. Qed iżomm fuq sieq waħda, anzi fuq is-swaba ta' sieq waħda, idejh imissu ma' xulxin fuq rasu biex jiffurmaw isa ħnejja. Jibqa' f'din il-qagħda għal sekondi twal immens. Imbagħad b'armonija b'ħeffa u b'saħħa li ħalluni maġġeb, jibda speċi ta' żifna salvaġġa imma kontrollata sal-aħħar. Jagħti daqqa b'sieq, daqqa b'oħra u jdawwar sidru u rasu jolqod b'daqqiet veloċ ta' jdejh avversarji immaġinarji. Imbagħad jerġa' lura l-pożizzjoni ta' qabel. Ma jitħarrikx imma fuq is-sieq l-oħra. Wiċċu jesprimi konċentrazzjoni, luċidità kiesħa mingħajr ebda sentiment. Telibni l-konfużjoni mentali, irrid bil-fors nersaq lejn din il-persuna, nifhem il-qawwa tar-rieda li tippermettila tagħmel dawn l-eżerċizzji lil minn kull limitu fiżjoloġiku. Naqbad il-ġagaga nilbisha u noħroġ kif jien ħafru bil-piġama. Reazzjoni bla sens, marida, riżultat ta' ċirkostanzi. Nimxi malajr, nkaxkar saqajja ħafjin fil-ħaxix għasra bin-nida. Ta' tifel hekk konni ġġu nixxabbat maħut il-bniet tul ix-xfar tan-niemen. Il-frijaj taż-żafżaf kienu jiddendlu għal ġolmlijiet griżi ta' xmara, jitraċċaw il-kurrenti veloċi tagħha. Niftakar it-twissijiet Tommi, id-daħb ta' missieri. Infittex id-disprat dik il-figura mgeżrura fiċ-ċpar. Imma għebet. Kull m'hemm iċċinju fl-għadira jew mkajman fiċ-ċrieki wiesa. Il-bqija tad-dinja ma titħarrikx. Nagħlaq għajnejja. Għana tal-asafar u tokki tal-qniepen. Irid inkun naf min hu dak ir-raġel li rrid nifhem. Inħares madwari. Fuq il-lemin mill-masġar tal-betula jasal it-taħbit ritmiku tas-saqajna. Indawwar rasi. Propju dak li bes l-abjad. L-Asjatiku qed jiġri niżel il-mogħdija u ġej lejja. Anke jekk għadu tal-inqas mitpass il-bot minni, nintebaħ minnu fih lil ġest atletku tiegħu u ta' sbuħija li qatt ma rajt bħalha. L-armonija primordjali. Il-qatfa ta' riġlejh perfetta. Hekk fi żminijiet ieħor x'aktar ġrew l-antinati tagħna, fil-ġungli u l-foresti verġni. Hekk preċiż. Il-ġiri bħala l-mument li jiġi eżatt wara l-mixi. Xejn mekkaniku jew mitgħallem, imma sempliċement assorbit minn ġuf l-omm wirt ġenetiku tal-bnidmin.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you.
And I would like to keep on reading more because, you know,
it's so a beautiful sound. It's so poetic. It's really fantastic sound. I appreciate it very, very much.
The sound of the language
is unbelievable, melodioso, bellissimo.
Even to be fair, Mark did a lovely, I mean, the original obviously text, needless to say, but Mark did a lovely job on the translation and managed to keep, as you say, melodioso and made it.
Yes, melodioso.
I
never tire of hearing, you know, I could go on hearing and listening to.
If I could make just a linguistic comment or a traductological comment, there was a moment where it was so tricky to translate Italian to Maltese when we have such a rich Italian element in Maltese, you know, such a rich Romance element, where even many times colloquially, you and I, being a bit Italophile, you get an Italian word in your head and you multisize it without it being
absolutely, constantly.
And it was, sometimes it was seeming too easy, you know. So, as not to reflect the text, you know, so faithfully, there was even this keeping back, this going forward, keeping the Maltese idiom, but at the same time, not losing a certain melody of Italian. So it was a lot of compromises, you know.
Fantastic.
And that was obviously a nice balance, part of the game. But I mean, there were times when I said, okay, I cannot say lucidità primordiali, antagonista. It would be as if I'm multisizing what Paolo wrote.
What Paolo wrote, exactly.
You know,
yes. No, it's very, very. I appreciate very much. Really, appreciate
fantastic.
it.
Guys, I'm really enjoying this talk, and probably we could go on and on and on, but I'm aware there's even in an online festival there's time limits. I really wanted to thank you guys, but one last thing maybe, Paolo, I know, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you've just published a new book in Italy.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to very briefly, I know some of our viewers here, well, quite a few of our viewers
look,
read Italian.
We could say the same, a lot of same thing is again 30 of the last century, is again sport, is again a tragic character, Bela Gutmann, in this case, a huge figure in history of football, but with an unbelievable life, tragic life after the fall of Habsburg Empire, and then obviously the tragic of the Second World War. He was a Jew, and he was always with a lot of problem, really a difficult life, but again a huge character for football. So I have had a lot of fun to write it. I hope the readers will also have. On Italian, the title is Una casacca di seta blu, and this for Mondadori Narrative, the publisher.
Good luck with that. Good luck. I'm sure it will be as big a success as this one was.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I want to finally thank you both very much, and to thank Mark, obviously for the translation, but also for your time this evening. And obviously, thank you very much to Paolo for...
Grazie di tutto, e un carissimo saluto all'isola di Malta e a tutti voi amici.
Grazie a voi due.
Grazie
Ciao.
ħafna, Chris.
Grazie.
Bil-Malti wkoll, grazzi ħafna, Chris. Grazzi lil Merlin u grazzi lil Paolo, ħadd gost ħafna nitkellem magħkom fit-taħdita qasira tagħna.
Ekku, jiena kemm nispiċċa billi ngħid li l-ktieb l-aħħar sajf ta' Berlin, nagħmel ovvjament xi promozzjoni finali, il-festival m'għandix l-stands dis-sena, imma edin online, tistaw sibuh tmorru fuq merlinpublishers.com, hija tal-bej hemmhekk, u apparti mill-offerta li tixtri tnejn u tieħu tażel it-tielet wieħed b'xejn, il-posta l-Malta Għawdex hija b'xejn, jiġifieri qed nippruvaw kemm jista' jkun l-effett tal-festival tas-soltu nirreplikawh kif nistgħu f'dawn ċirkostanzi straordinarji. Grazzi ħafna u il-lejli tajjeb.